Want to ask you something. If someone you loved disappeared overnight and the world told you they never existed, would you believe the world or would you believe yourself? Because I chose to believe myself, and what I found changed everything I thought I knew about who I was. Here's what happened. My name is Casey. I'm 24 years old. I live in Austin, Texas. Or I did in the version of my life that existed before all of this. I still live in Austin, but not in that apartment, not in that neighborhood, not anywhere near that street. I graduated from UT Austin 18 months ago with a degree in graphic design. I work at a mid-sized creative agency downtown. Brand identity, visual systems, the kind of work that requires you to look at things carefully and notice when something is off, when a color is wrong, when a line doesn't quite meet where it should, when the overall picture doesn't add up to the sum of its parts. I am professionally trained to notice when things don't add up. I missed it for 3 months. That is the thing I have had to make peace with, that I lived alongside something that didn't add up for 3 entire months and did not see it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about Jade. Jade Ellison walked into my life at the worst possible time and the best possible time simultaneously, the way certain people do, arriving exactly when you need them without either of you knowing that's what's happening. I had just ended a 2-year relationship. His name was Tyler, and he was not a bad person, I want to be clear about that. He was just not the right person, and we had both known it longer than either of us had been willing to say out loud. And when we finally said it out loud, it was more relief than grief, which told me everything I needed to know about what we had actually been. I was 23, newly single, living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in East Austin that was slightly too expensive for my salary, but that I had signed the lease on during the optimistic early months of my relationship with Tyler, when I had imagined we would eventually split the cost. We had not split the cost. I was paying it alone. I needed a roommate. I had posted on 3 different platforms, the standard apartment finding apps, a local Austin housing Facebook group, a UT alumni board with a straightforward listing. East Austin, 1-bedroom, would convert living room into 2nd bedroom with a privacy partition, looking for a working professional or recent graduate, non-smoker, no pets. I got 11 responses in the first week. Jade Ellison responded on day 4. Her message was different from the others, not in a dramatic way, just in the way that certain things stand out when you're reading a lot of sameness. Most of the responses were transactional. Name, job, move-in date, can I see the place? Jade's message was longer. She told me a little about herself. 23, just moved to Austin from Portland, working remotely in marketing, didn't know many people in the city yet, and was hoping to find a living situation that was also a social situation. She said she liked the neighborhood from what she had seen of it on her one visit. She said she was a good cook and a light sleeper, and was slightly allergic to conflict, which she knew was an odd thing to put in a housing inquiry, but she thought transparency up front saved everyone time. I laughed out loud at that last line. I asked her to come see the place. She came the following Saturday morning. I want to describe her accurately, because the description matters. Medium height, dark hair, almost black, cut in a way that suggested she had strong opinions about her appearance without being fussy about it. Warm eyes, the kind of easy smile that makes you feel immediately that the person behind it is not performing anything, just genuinely present. She was wearing a vintage band tee tucked into wide-leg jeans and ankle boots, and she looked like someone who had figured out her style completely without thinking too hard about it. She walked in, looked around, asked 3 specific and practical questions about the water pressure, the street noise, and the building's laundry situation, and then said, "I really like it. I'd love to live here if you'll have me." Just like that. I showed 2 more apartments that week, as I had planned to. I picked Jade. She moved in 6 weeks later with 2 suitcases, a box of books, a small collection of plants that she arranged on the windowsill with the particular care of someone who takes living things seriously, and a Bluetooth speaker that played the kind of music I didn't know I liked until I heard it in my own kitchen. Within 3 weeks, it felt like she had always been there. That is the only way I can describe it. Some people take time to settle into a shared space. There's an adjustment period, a negotiation of habits and rhythms, a getting used to. With Jade, there was none of that. She fit into the apartment, into my routines, into my social life when I introduced her to my friends, into the particular texture of my daily existence. She was funny, not performatively. She didn't tell jokes. She just had a way of observing things that made you see them differently and laugh at what you saw. She was thoughtful. She remembered things people told her and referenced them later, which is a small thing that is actually a large thing in terms of what it tells you about how seriously someone takes the people around them. She was a good cook. She had not been lying about that. And she was a good listener. The best kind, the kind who asks the follow-up question that tells you they were actually tracking what you said rather than waiting for their turn to speak. I told her things I hadn't told most of my friends, about Tyler, about the specific shape of that ending and what it had clarified for me about what I actually wanted. About my family, my mother who I was close to, my father who I was not, the particular geography of a family that had not quite broken but had fault lines you had to navigate carefully. About work, about the projects I was proud of and the ones that were making me question whether I was in the right field. She told me things too. About Portland, about a relationship she had left there that she described with the particular restraint of someone who has processed something painful and decided it doesn't get more of her energy than she's already given it. About her family, a mother she was close to, no siblings, a grandmother in Oregon who she called every Sunday without fail. 3 months. That's how long we lived together. 92 days to be specific. I know the exact number because I counted backward from the morning she wasn't there. The morning of October 14th, I woke up at 7:15, my alarm. Normal Tuesday. I had an early client call at 8:30 and wanted coffee and a few minutes of quiet before it. I got up, went to the kitchen, started the coffee machine. Jade's door was open. That was the first thing I noticed. She kept it closed when she slept. She had mentioned early on that she was a light sleeper and the ambient sounds of the apartment sometimes woke her. She always kept it closed. It was open. Wide open. I went to look. Her room was empty. Not just Jade not in it empty. Empty. The partition bed was made. Too neatly, the way a room looks when someone deliberately smoothed everything down, rather than the casual made of someone who makes their bed every morning. Her clothes were not in the small closet. Her shoes were not by the door where she always left them. The books were gone from the shelf she had set up. The plants were gone from the windowsill. Everything was gone. Like she had packed up quietly and completely while I slept. I stood in the doorway of her empty room for a long moment. Then I called her. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. "Hey, it's Jade. Leave me a message." I said, "Jade, what's going on? Where are you? Call me back." I hung up. I called again. Voicemail. I texted. 3 texts in succession. "Where are you? Are you okay? Please call me." Nothing. I had my 8:30 call. I sat at my desk with my coffee going cold, and I conducted myself professionally through 45 minutes of brand strategy discussion while my mind was somewhere else. After the call, I went back to Jade's room. I stood in it. It smelled like her, the particular combination of her shampoo and the candle she burned sometimes in the evenings. That smell was still there. She hadn't been gone long. Or she had been planning this for a while and vacated quickly. I didn't know which. I called her mother. I want to be precise about how I had this number. Jade had given it to me early on, the way people do when they share a living space. Emergency contact, just in case. Here's my mom's number. Her name is Patricia. She's in Portland. I had put it in my phone under Jade's mom, Patricia, and never expected to use it. I used it now. It rang twice. A woman answered, warm, slight Pacific Northwest flatness to the vowels. Hello? Hi, is this Patricia, Jade's mom? A pause. I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number. Oh, I'm sorry, is this not Patricia Ellison? Another pause. My name is Patricia, she said carefully, but I don't have a daughter named Jade. I stood very still in Jade's empty room. I'm sorry, I said. I must have the wrong number. I hung up. I looked at the contact in my phone. Jade's mom, Patricia. The number Jade had given me, typed into my phone while Jade stood next to me in this room 3 months ago, watching me save it. I called the number again. Same woman, same careful voice. Hello? I hung up without saying anything. I sat down on Jade's neatly made bed, and I thought, okay, something is very wrong. I went to my building manager that afternoon. His name was Gerald, late 50s, efficient, the kind of building manager who knew every tenant's name and which units had recurring plumbing issues before he slid a notice under your door. I sat on that couch for a long time, phone in my hands, scrolling through 92 days of a life I remembered clearly, a life that the photographs said happened differently than I remembered. And I thought, there are 2 possibilities here. Either Jade Ellison was real and something has erased every trace of her existence from my life, or... I stopped that thought. I was not ready for the other possibility, not yet. Instead, I did what I am trained to do. I looked for the thing that didn't add up, and I found it. In the corner of a photograph from September 14th, a hiking trail, late afternoon light, just me in the frame. A shadow. The wrong shape for my shadow. The wrong length. 2 people's shadows. One of them mine. One of them someone else. Someone who should have been in that photograph. Someone who had been. I stared at that shadow for a long time. September 14th, the Barton Creek Greenbelt Trail. Late afternoon, the kind of Austin September afternoon where the heat has finally started to release its grip and the light comes through the cedar trees at an angle that makes everything look slightly golden and slightly unreal. I remembered that day clearly. We had gone after work. Jade's idea. She had been talking about wanting to hike since she arrived in Austin, and I had been meaning to take her, and we had finally made it happen on a random Thursday. We had stopped at that overlook. I remembered it specifically. The view of the creek below, Jade standing beside me saying something about how she understood now why people loved this city, and I had taken a photo. Of myself. That's what the photo showed. Just me, at the overlook, the creek visible behind me, afternoon light. But the shadow on the ground in front of me was 2 people. My shadow, and beside it, slightly taller, slightly different proportions, someone else's. Someone who had been standing next to me when that photograph was taken. A person who was not in the photograph. I zoomed in. I zoomed in until the image pixelated and became abstract shapes, and then I zoomed back out to where it was still clear. The shadow was real. It was not a trick of light or a tree branch or anything explainable. It was a human shadow, distinct and separate from mine, belonging to a person who had been standing beside me when that photograph was taken. A person who was not in the photograph. I went through every photo from the past 3 months again, more carefully this time, looking not at what was in them, but at what was missing, at the edges, at the shadows, at the reflections, windows, sunglasses, car mirrors. I found 4 more. A reflection in the window of a coffee shop on South Congress, my face looking in, and just at the edge of the frame, barely visible, the reflection of a second face, dark hair, looking away from the camera. A shadow on the sidewalk outside my building. October 3rd, I had taken a photo of the sunset, and on the sidewalk there were 2 shadows stretching long in the evening light. A reflection in my own sunglasses. I had taken a selfie in July before Jade moved in, trying on new sunglasses at a vintage shop. Clear shot of myself in both lenses, but in one lens, in the background, a figure I didn't recognize standing near the back of the shop. And one more. October 12th, 2 days before she disappeared, I had taken a video, just a short one, 15 seconds, pointing my phone at the Austin skyline from our apartment window because the clouds were doing something beautiful. At the very end of the video, just before I stopped recording, a hand appeared at the edge of the frame, reaching past me to point to something. A woman's hand, dark painted nails. Jade's nails were always dark. I had looked at that video 3 times already and had not seen the hand, had not been looking for it. Now I could not unsee it. I called my friend Melissa. Melissa Chung had been my closest friend in Austin since we met at a design industry mixer 2 years ago. She was sharp, practical, and did not deal in drama. If I was going to test my perception of reality against someone else's, Melissa was the right person. She answered on the second ring. I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." She said, "Always." I said, "Jade, my roommate. Have you met her? Have you seen her?" A pause. Not a long one, just a beat. "Casey, you don't have a roommate." "Melissa, she came to your birthday dinner September 28th at Uchi. She sat across from you. You talked about Portland for 20 minutes because you'd been there in the summer." Silence. "Casey," Melissa said slowly, "there was no one across from me at dinner. You were there, and Jake, and Priya, and Thomas. That was it." "There were 5 of us," I said. "There were 4 of us," Melissa said. I hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment, and I made a decision. I was not going crazy. I was certain of that. Not in the way of someone in denial, but in the very specific way of someone who knows the difference between their own mind working correctly and their own mind failing. I had lived in this mind for 24 years. I knew its textures. I knew when I was tired or stressed or confused. I knew what uncertainty felt like from the inside. This was not uncertainty. This was clarity encountering a wall. Jade Ellison was real. Something had happened to the evidence of her existence. Those were 2 different things, and I was going to treat them as 2 different things. I made a list. Things I knew for certain about Jade. She had responded to my housing listing on a Tuesday in late June. She had come to see the apartment the following Saturday. She had moved in 6 weeks later. She had lived with me for 92 days. She had given me a phone number for her mother in Portland. She had told me she worked remotely in marketing. She had told me she was from Portland. She had told me she left a relationship there. She had told me she called her grandmother every Sunday. I started with the housing listing. I still had the original post. I had never deleted it, it had just expired on the platform. I went into my account and found the listing, and opened it. The inquiry from Jade Ellison was not there. I went through every inquiry, all 11 of them, still visible in my account history. Jade's was not among them. I felt cold. I opened my email. I had emailed back and forth with Jade before she came to see the apartment, arranging the viewing time, confirming the address. I went to my sent folder and searched her name. Nothing. I searched her email address. I had it somewhere. I had emailed her the lease addendum when she moved in. I stopped. The lease addendum. I had sent it. I remember sending it. I had drafted it myself, a simple document outlining the informal arrangement, her portion of the rent, the shared utility agreement. I had attached it to an email and sent it, and she had signed it and returned it. I went to my sent folder. The email was not there. I went to my documents folder on my laptop. I had saved the addendum. There, I remember saving it, remembered what I named the file. The file was not there. I sat at my laptop and I breathed, very carefully, and then I opened my browser history. I don't know exactly what I was looking for, just something, some trace, the digital equivalent of the shadow on the hiking trail photograph. I went back through 92 days of browser history, and I found it on day 47. A Google search, Jade Ellison, Portland, Oregon. I had searched her name. I didn't remember doing that, but I had. It was there in my history, date and time stamped, a Tuesday afternoon. People search their roommates, it's normal. You meet someone through a listing, they seem fine, you Google them anyway because you're about to give them a key to your home. I had Googled her. I clicked on the search. The results loaded, and there, on the second page, a LinkedIn profile. Jade Ellison, Portland, Oregon. Marketing professional. I clicked on it. The profile loaded, and I sat back in my chair and I said out loud to my empty apartment, "There you are." It was sparse, not unusual for someone who didn't use LinkedIn heavily. A profile photo, a job history, a few connections. The photo was small but clear enough to see. It was Jade. Dark hair, warm eyes, that easy smile. Real. Existing. Documented. I screenshotted everything immediately, the profile, the photo, the URL. And then I looked at her connections. She had 42 connections listed. I scrolled through them. Names and faces I didn't recognize, Portland people presumably, former colleagues and acquaintances. And then, near the bottom of the list, a name I recognized. Not from my life in Austin, from before Austin. A name I had not thought about in years. A name that belonged to a person who had no reason to be connected to my roommate from Portland. I opened his profile. Robert Casey, Dallas, Texas, senior partner at a mid-sized private equity firm, married, no children listed, which I had always noted with a particular flatness whenever I had looked at his profile in previous years. I was not listed. I had never been listed. I looked at his connections. He had 412 connections. I searched for Jade Ellison. She appeared immediately. Connected for, I checked the connection date, 8 months. They had connected on LinkedIn 8 months ago, 2 months before Jade found my housing listing. I sat with that timeline. 2 months before Jade found my listing, 8 months before she disappeared from my life without a trace. I picked up my phone. I called my father. It rang 3 times. I had expected voicemail, had been preparing myself for voicemail, for the slightly formal message he had recorded that I had heard too many times over the years. He answered. "Casey?" His voice, still recognizable after 2 years, still carrying that particular quality, not warm exactly, more like careful, like someone who has learned to be precise with words. He told me. Not everything, not that night on the phone, but enough. Enough to understand that Jade Ellison had not found my housing listing by accident. She had not moved to Austin by chance. She had not knocked on my door because of the rent price or the neighborhood or the transparent note about being allergic to conflict. She had come specifically for me. Sent by a man who shared my DNA and had never once put my name on his LinkedIn profile. And the reason he had sent her, the thing he needed her to find out, had everything to do with something my mother had never told me. Something that she had been keeping for 24 years. Something that, if it was true, changed who I was at a fundamental level. Not just who my father was, who I was. My father wanted to meet in person. I said no. Not because I was afraid of him. I had never been afraid of my father. He was too absent to be frightening. But because I had learned something in the past 48 hours about what happened when you gave people time to prepare. Gerald, the building manager, had been prepared. Patricia in Portland had been prepared. Every wall I had hit in the past 2 days had the particular smoothness of something that had been arranged in advance. I was not going to give my father time to arrange anything. "Tell me on the phone," I said, "right now, or I drive to Dallas tonight." A pause. Then he talked. I'm going to tell you what he said the way he said it. Not clean, not linear, the way things come out when someone has been holding something for a long time and is finally releasing it under pressure. It came in pieces. I had to ask questions to fill the gaps. By the end, I had something close to the full picture. Close to. My mother's name is Ellen Casey. She grew up in Houston, moved to Austin at 22, met my father at 24 at a work event. They dated for 2 years, married, had me, divorced when I was 9. This is the version of events I have always known. What I did not know, what my father told me on the phone that night, was that my mother had not been entirely honest about the timeline, specifically about me. He said, and I want to be precise about his exact words because they matter, "Casey, I need you to understand that I am not certain about this. I have never been certain. That's why I hired Jade, to find out." "Find out what?" I said. "Whether you're mine," he said. The apartment was very quiet. "What?" I've had reason to question it carefully for years. There were circumstances around the time you were conceived that made me uncertain. I never asked my mother directly. I don't know if I was afraid of the answer or afraid of what it would mean for everything. So I did nothing. For 24 years, I did nothing. "And then you hired someone to spy on me?" I said. "I hired someone to get close to you," he said, "to find out things I could use to—" "I wanted a DNA sample, Casey. I needed something I could test." I stood up from where I had been sitting. I walked to the window. Outside Austin was doing what Austin does at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday. Still alive, still lit, still moving, completely indifferent to the fact that a 24-year-old woman was standing at her window, finding out that her entire understanding of her own origins was possibly incorrect. "Did she get it?" I asked. "Jade, did she get what you needed?" A pause. "Yes," he said. "And?" The longest pause yet. "I don't have the results yet," he said. "It takes time." I thought about Jade, about 92 days of shared meals and honest conversations, and the particular intimacy of people who live together and learn each other's rhythms. About the moment she had handed me the phone number for her supposed mother in Portland, how naturally she had done it, how completely unrehearsed it had seemed. "She was collecting DNA," I said, flat, just stating it. "A hair sample," he said. "From your brush," she said. She told me she had it. That's why she left when she did. She had what she needed." I thought about my hairbrush on the bathroom shelf, which I had shared a bathroom with Jade for 3 months. "Who else knows about this?" I asked. "No one," he said. "Just me and Jade, and now you." "Does Mom know you've been questioning this for 24 years? "No." "Does she know you hired someone to live with me?" "God, no." I stood at that window for a long time. "Casey," my father said. His voice had changed again. Some of the carefulness had dropped away, and underneath it was something I had not heard from him in a very long time. Something that sounded almost like the actual person rather than the managed version of the person. I know there's no version of this that's okay. I know that. What I did was wrong. The way I did it was wrong. I should have come to you directly. I should have come to you years ago. Stop, I said. He stopped. "I need to think. I'm going to hang up now. Don't call me." I hung up. I stood at the window for another 10 minutes, and then I called my mother. Ellen Casey answered on the 4th ring, slightly breathless. She had been in the garden, she said. She had left her phone inside. "Sorry, what's wrong? You never call this late." I said, "Mom, I need you to tell me something, and I need you to tell me the truth." A pause. "Casey, what's happened? Is Robert Casey my biological father?" The silence that followed was 3 seconds. I counted. 3 seconds is a long time to wait for an answer to that question. "Where is this coming from?" she said finally. Her voice was careful in a way I recognized. It was the voice she used when she was deciding how much to say. "Mom, Casey, is he my father?" Another pause, shorter this time. And then she said, Quietly, in a voice I had never heard her use before, a voice that sounded like something being set down after a long time of carrying it, "I don't know." 2 words. I don't know. I sat on my floor, not on a chair, not on the couch, just down. "What does that mean?" I said. She talked for a long time. I am going to tell you the shape of what she said without all the details, because some of them are hers and not mine to share. The shape is this. 25 years ago, my mother was in love with 2 men simultaneously. Not carelessly, she was not a careless person, but she was 23 years old and her life had a complexity to it that she had not fully resolved when circumstances resolved it for her. She became pregnant. She was not certain which man was the father. She made a decision, not the right one, she told me. She knew even at the time it was not entirely right, to marry Robert because he was the safer choice, the more stable choice, the choice that made sense on paper. The other man, she paused before she said his name, the other man's name was David Reyes. He had been her college boyfriend and they had reconnected briefly. He had moved away, out of state, out of her life, before she knew she was pregnant. She had not told him. She had chosen Robert and closed the door on the question of David and carried the uncertainty quietly for 24 years. "Did you ever try to find out?" I asked. "Did you ever get a test?" "No," she said. "Why?" A long pause. "Because by the time it would have mattered, by the time Robert and I were in trouble, when the divorce was coming, you were 9 years old, and I thought, what does the answer change? You were my daughter, whoever your biological father was, you were mine and I was yours, and that was what was real." I sat on my floor and I thought about that. What does the answer change? "It changes everything," I said, "or nothing, depending." "I know," she said quietly. "I know that now." We talked for another hour. By the end, I had a name, David Reyes, and a general sense of his last known location, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, Portland area, she thought, though she hadn't tracked him and didn't know for certain. Portland. Jade had told me she was from Portland. I thought about that after I hung up with my mother. I thought about it for a long time, and then I opened my laptop, and I searched for David Reyes, Portland, Oregon. He wasn't hard to find. He had a professional presence, an architect it turned out, running a small firm in Portland that did residential and commercial design, a website with a clean aesthetic and a brief bio, and a photograph. I looked at the photograph for a long time. David Reyes was 51 years old in that photograph. Dark hair going silver at the temples, strong jaw, warm eyes with laugh lines at the corners of his eyes. I looked at his face, and I thought about my own face. The jaw, the eyes, the particular way the laugh lines had already started at the corners of my own eyes even at 24, which my mother always said I got from her side. Maybe, or maybe not. I kept looking at his website. His bio mentioned he had grown up in Texas, Houston specifically, which is where my mother had grown up, which is how they had met, presumably, in college there. He had a section on his website for his team, 3 other architects, an office manager, an intern, a marketing and outreach intern, the bio said, helping with the firm's social media and client communications. Her name was listed. Her photograph was there. Dark hair, warm eyes, that easy smile. Jade Ellison. I stared at her photograph on David Reyes's architectural firm website for a long time. Jade Ellison was not a private investigator hired by my father. She was an intern at the firm of the man who might be my biological father, which meant one of 2 things. Either David sent Jade, which means he knew about me, had known about me, had sent someone to get close to me for his own reasons, or Jade found something out at her internship, something about her employer's past, something about me, and then acted on her own. I picked up my phone. I was done with intermediaries. I was done with managed silences and careful pauses and people deciding how much to tell me. I found David Reyes's office number on his website. I called it. It was 11 p.m. I expected voicemail. He answered. "Reyes Architecture?" A man's voice, warm, slightly surprised. It was late for a business call. "My name is Casey," I said. "My mother's name is Ellen. She grew up in Houston. I think you knew her 25 years ago." Complete silence. Then, "Casey," he said, not a question. I hung up. I sat in my apartment. Two men, one who had hired a stranger to collect my DNA without my knowledge, one who had wondered for 24 years and said nothing out of respect for a choice that had already been made. Two very different kinds of absent. And somewhere out there, in Portland maybe, or somewhere else entirely, a woman named Jade Ellison, who had read letters in an archive and decided that a stranger deserved to know the truth, who had lived with me for 92 days, who had made me laugh and cooked in my kitchen, and stood beside me at a hiking trail overlook when I took a photo that showed only one of us, who then disappeared as deliberately as she had arrived, leaving nothing behind but a shadow on a photograph, and one question I could not stop turning over. She had my father's DNA sample, and my father had the results now. He had texted me that morning while I was on the phone with David. One text, 3 words. Results came back. I had not responded. I had not opened it, because I was standing at a threshold. On one side, not knowing, on the other, knowing, and I was trying to decide which version of my life I wanted to step into. I didn't open my father's text for 3 days. I want to be honest about that, because I think it's the most human part of this whole story. Not the mystery, not the shadow on the photograph, not the LinkedIn connection or the letters in the archive or the woman who lived with me for 92 days and disappeared without a trace. The most human part is this. I had the answer within reach, and I waited 3 days to take it, because knowing changes things. Not always in the ways you expect, not always in the ways you fear, but it changes things. And I was 24 years old, standing at the edge of a change I hadn't asked for and couldn't unask for. And I needed 3 days to stand there before I stepped through. I went to work, I designed things, I looked at visual systems and found where they broke down and fixed them. I called my mother once, a short call, not about any of this, just to hear her voice and tell her I loved her, which I do, which has not changed, which will not change regardless of what any piece of paper says about anyone's DNA. She said, "Casey, whatever you decide, I'm here." She knew I had the text. I had told her. She had not told me what to do with it. That was the right call. On the 3rd morning, I woke up early, before my alarm, before the city was fully awake. That particular Austin early morning that is one of the best things about this city in the fall. Cool enough to open the window, quiet enough to hear the birds, light just starting at the edges of things. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table. I picked up my phone. I opened the text from Robert Casey. It said, "Results came back. I think you should see them. Can we talk?" I typed back, "Send them." He sent a file, a PDF, clinical formatting, the kind of document that reduces fundamental human questions to percentages and probability ranges and technical language designed to be precise without being cruel. I read it. I read it twice. And then I set my phone down at the kitchen table and I looked out the window at the Austin morning and I sat with what I now knew. Robert Casey was not my biological father. The probability was stated clearly, 99.97% exclusion. He was not my father, had never been my father, had married my mother and given me his name for 9 years, and then faded quietly from my life, and had never been my father. I thought about how to feel about that. I thought about it for a long time, and what I landed on, not immediately, not cleanly, but eventually, was something I had not expected: relief. Not because Robert was a bad man. He wasn't. He was a limited man, a man who had not known how to be present for a child he wasn't sure was his, a man who had made choices I didn't agree with, but could, from a certain distance, understand. But he had never been mine, and I had always known, in the way you know things in your body before you know them in your mind, that he had never been mine. The distance between us had always felt like information. Now I knew what it was information about. I called David Reyes that afternoon. He answered quickly, like he had been waiting. I said, "The results came back." He said, "I know. Robert called me." I stopped. "He called you?" "This morning," David said, "early. I think he wanted to tell me himself before you did. I don't know if that was consideration or something else." I thought about Robert calling David Reyes at dawn to deliver the results of a paternity test to the man who turned out to be his ex-wife's biological father of their child. "What did he say?" I asked. He said, "She's yours." David's voice was careful on those two words, carrying something. And then he said he was sorry, for a lot of things, for a long time. I sat with that. Robert Casey calling David Reyes to say, "She's yours," and "I'm sorry." That was, I didn't have the right word, complicated, human, the kind of thing you don't know what to do with, so you just hold it. "David," I said, "I don't know what this looks like going forward. I want to be honest about that. I'm 24 years old, and I just found out my entire understanding of where I came from was wrong, and I don't know what I need from you or what you need from me or how any of this works." He said, "I know. I think I want to meet you at some point, when I'm ready. I think I want to sit across from you and see what it feels like." He said, "I would like that very much," quietly. "I'm not ready yet," I said. "Take whatever time you need," he said. "I've waited 24 years. I can wait a little longer." I thought about the photograph on his website, the jaw, the eyes. "Okay," I said. I found Jade 3 weeks later, not through a search, nothing so clean as that, through a mutual connection of all things, a friend of a friend who had gone to school in Portland and knew someone who knew someone. The way things still travel sometimes, through the old human networks that predate algorithms. She was in Portland, back at her apartment, back at her life, working a new job at a different firm. I sent her a message. Short. I had drafted it many times and kept coming back to short. I said, "I know what you did and why you did it. I'm not angry. I have questions. If you're willing to answer them, I'm willing to ask." She responded within an hour. She said, "I was wondering when you'd find me. Ask whatever you want." We talked for 2 hours on the phone. She answered everything. She told me about finding the letters in David's archive, about reading them over several days, a few at a time during lunch breaks when the office was quiet, about the particular feeling of holding someone else's 24-year-old secret in your hands and knowing it belonged to a person who didn't know it existed. She told me about being adopted, about finding her own biological family at 22, about what it had given her and what it had cost her, and what she wished someone had done for her that she decided to do for me. "You could have just told me," I said. "You could have knocked on my door and said, 'I work for a man who might be your father.'" She said, "I know, but I didn't know if it was true yet, and I didn't know if you knew you were looking for something. Some people don't know they're looking until someone helps them look." I thought about that. "Did you know?" she asked. "Did you have any sense that something was off?" I thought about the distance between me and Robert, the way it had always felt like information. "Maybe," I said, "in the way you know things before you know them." "Yeah," she said, "that's what I thought." We talked about practical things after that, about what she had and hadn't taken. Only the hair sample, she was clear about that. Nothing else had been touched or moved or interfered with. About why every trace of her disappeared from my photos and my accounts. She hadn't done that, she said. She had no idea how that had happened. That part remained unexplained. I have thought about it since, about the photos where she should have appeared and didn't, about the LinkedIn inquiry that vanished, and the emails that disappeared, and Gerald, the building manager, who had never seen her come or go. Some of it I have explanations for. She had been careful, more careful than I realized, about which photos she appeared in, always slightly off frame, always angled away. The documents, she had access to my laptop for a time, she admitted that. She had cleared certain things. But not all of it. Some of it I simply cannot account for. And I have decided, for my sanity and for the ability to move forward, that some things do not need to be fully explained. Some mysteries are allowed to remain mysteries. Not every shadow needs a source. I met David Reyes in February, 4 months after the phone call, 4 months of emails, tentative at first, then more natural, finding the rhythm of two people who are strangers with an enormous amount in common. He came to Austin. His choice. He offered, said he wanted to come to me, said it seemed right that he should be the one to travel. We met at a coffee shop on South Congress, neutral ground, public space, the kind of meeting that can be short if it needs to be, long if it can be long. He was taller in person than the photograph suggested. He walked in and looked around and saw me and stopped for just a moment. That moment, I keep coming back to that moment, the particular look on his face when he saw me for the first time. Not surprise, he had seen photographs by then. I had sent him some, he had sent me some. We had done that careful preparatory exchange. Recognition, like looking at something familiar in a face you have never seen. He sat down. He said, "Hi." I said, "Hi." We ordered coffee, and we talked for 4 hours. About Houston, where he grew up, and where my mother grew up, and where their paths crossed at 23, about architecture, why he had chosen it, what it meant to him, the particular satisfaction of designing spaces where people lived their real lives, about adoption, his intern Jade's experience, and through that conversation, a kind of oblique discussion of what it meant to find late who you came from, about Austin and Portland, about the 24 years in between. He did not try to be my father. That was the thing I had been most afraid of, that he would arrive with some predetermined idea of what this was supposed to be, father and daughter reunited, clean narrative, matching DNA, matching destiny. He didn't do that. He was just a person, sitting across from me, interested in who I was, telling me who he was, letting the shape of whatever this was form slowly with. That's the whole story, or the part I'm ready to tell. I want to say something to anyone listening who has ever looked at their life and felt like some piece of it was missing, like there was a question underneath everything that you hadn't quite let yourself ask. Ask it. I know that's easier to say than to do. I know the answer might be complicated. Mine was. But here is what I know now that I didn't know a year ago. The missing piece doesn't complete you. You were already complete. What it does is, it gives the thing you always felt but couldn't name a name. And that is worth something. That is worth quite a lot. Thanks for listening.